Archuleta?
It is. There we go. Thank you. Hi, Brian. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing on the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood Area Planning Committee. I'm Liz Archuleta. I am the District 2 County Supervisor. So I represent you on the Coconino County Board of Supervisors, and currently I'm the chair of the board. And I know this is a lot of work for all the committee members, so let me just tell you how much we appreciate the work that you've put in so far and your continued commitment to this effort.
Thank you, Liz. We appreciate all that you've done for the county.
Thank you.
Jim Clifford.
Jim Clifford, District 2 Planning and Zoning Commissioner, work for W.L. Gore.
Teresa Munoz.
Hi, everyone. I am Teresa Munoz. I am the Executive Assistant to Supervisor Archuleta and help her represent District 2.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Let's see, who else do I have? I have a Chris. K-R-I-S. Is Chris there? Okay. And then I have somebody on an iPhone.
Yeah, hi, Brian. This is Jess McNeely. Work with Melissa. My job's incredibly easy because she does a very good job. By the way, I just tried emailing Rob, just trying a couple different methods of communication here, letting him know we're on. Good to see you, everybody.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Oh, Sailor.
Sorry, I'm late, guys.
So, Sailor, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sailor, and I'm not for sure what all information are we sharing tonight.
Well, I think you're in District 4, aren't you?
I am in District 4, that is correct.
Okay. And Sailor's been on the committee for a while. Since the beginning, I believe.
Yes,
That's
I
right.
have. Yes, I have. I was on the phone last week, so some of you, or last month, so some of you might not have known I was there. So that's my fault.
But we've clarified that. You're on the notes, so you're in the record now.
Okay. All right, cool. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
Dan Martin, did we hear from you?
Yep, you did.
Okay. Well, I think that's everyone. I do want to share one thing quickly. The candidate for District Supervisor for District 4, Julie Begay, wanted to join us this night, and she was prevented from being with us. Rob, Melissa and I had a conversation, and we've agreed that if a candidate wants to present, if a candidate wants to view the meeting, then they're viewing the meeting as an individual, because this is nonpartisan, non-political. And so anybody that is running for office would basically be here as an observer. Is that accurate with what Melissa, is that accurate with what we agreed?
Sounds just right.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Well, let's move on tonight. And we have a presentation. No, we got the review from the July 9th meeting. Melissa, do you want to take us through that?
I'll get started, but I did want to back up a bit and just go over just a few updates, because we did want to follow up on a comment that came up last month regarding the status of the Horseman's Lodge. And if you remember, back in February, we had a discussion, and we basically presented a topic paper to everybody outlining what the situation, or the situation is with their zoning status. And if you all remember, they are considered legal nonconforming in terms of land use. And so, speaking just from a zoning code perspective, what that means is that their use, which is a commercial use, does not match the zoning, which is a residential zone. However, because they have been there for a very long time, they're considered legal nonconforming. Our zoning ordinance that thus recognizes that that use can continue operating. There is a provision in our ordinance that if a non-conforming use stops operation, then there's a 180-day clock that begins, and they either need to reopen within that window, or they will basically lose their legal nonconforming status. And we, as county staff, have been in touch with the property owners, which, as we know, is the Navajo Nation Gaming Enterprise. And we've had several conversations with them. They do intend to reopen the Horseman's Lodge. As you know, is closed right now. It closed mainly due to the virus and then some other issues that came out of that, this situation. But we will be having ongoing conversations with them, and they do intend to reopen so that they will maintain their legal nonconforming status. So that's just in a nutshell, a very quick update. It's just something that we've had some questions from the committee about, and then some additional questions have come up just outside of our meeting. So we wanted to make sure that we, gave you an update and just the information that we have, just strictly based on what we know per the zoning ordinance. Are there any questions on that before we move on?
Melissa, do you know the last date that they were open so that we could record that?
That's one thing we are working to determine with the property owner. So we don't know that yet. Okay.
Melissa, this is Liz. I just have a question on that. Hi.
Yes.
So is that the extent of the discussion on Horseman's Lodge tonight? Because I think that in speaking to Rob last night, I think he thought that there was going to be maybe more of a presentation, and that maybe some residents in the area were thinking about joining to hear a presentation or to communicate their perspectives on Horseman's Lodge.
Right. Thank you for that question. Yes, we did not plan a specific presentation on this. We have been connecting with the property owners for some time and have had them on and off the agenda to make a presentation. But tonight the intention was just to give an update. And I do believe that Dan Martin is online with us, and he was specifically interested in that as well. So if there are any questions regarding that, we could go over those at this time. But yeah, we didn't have a specific presentation other than to give this update because this is what we know at the moment.
Yeah, this is Dan. There's quite a few people in our committee and our group that are monitoring this pretty closely, because most of the people that are in the citizens group, Citizens for Neighborhood Preservation, I think we have like 70 or 80 members at the moment, which is considerable based on what's going on. So we're kind of watching this close in the timetable and making sure that we're up to date on this. We've had meetings with, is that Brian at the gaming, Navajo Gaming? Is that the guy's name?
He is the director, I believe. Yes.
We had him to one of our meetings. I think Jim Parks has been at one of our meetings. So we just want to be part of what you guys are doing and be notified as things are happening. So I think when I talked to you, Melissa, that you didn't really know what we were about and how active we were. So I'm really glad that we've hooked up and we can have communication through this. So as soon as you do get that timing, though, I've had many phone calls wanting to know when the 180 starts and why. So that's going to be important.
Okay, we can certainly communicate that as soon as we know, but it was something that, we did initiate conversations with the property owner to let them know about the situation with our zoning ordinance. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Else? You're welcome. Did anyone else have any questions on that topic? And we should have more information next time about the timing of that and what their thoughts are in terms of moving forward so that they can continue to operate that long-standing business, which has been there for many years.
Very quickly, Melissa, because of the COVID-19 and the shutdowns that have happened, has there been any discussion or is there any legal, are there any regulations that allow for a dispensation, say, because of some event of this nature that you know of?
Yeah, great question, Brian. And our zoning ordinance does not anticipate you know, something like a pandemic shutting businesses down. So that's why we're working with the property owners to understand what their actual closing date was. And yeah, that will be something that Jay and Jess will be looking at as well in terms of the language in our zoning ordinance, because it does not specifically talk about that type of situation.
Melissa, I know one of the questions I've had from some of our members, this is Dan again, sorry, is if they open for 2 weeks, can they close again for 6 months? I mean, what's the guidelines on that?
Right, and that is our understanding of the zoning ordinance. So if they open on a shorter term basis, something like that, then that would reset the clock.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
I have a question about something that was in the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay, are we moving on to that then?
Yeah,
Brian?
one of the things posted is about where we were discussing about whether Doney Park or our area was a gateway. And I don't know if we've ever resolved that or if we plan to continue thinking about it or what.
Good question, Dave. And that is something we'll be looking at tonight as we develop the vision statement. So that was a comment that came up that several people had discussion about when we were doing our vision exercise. So hold on to that thought, and we will explore that more closely when we get to that part of tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question, Dave. Go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry, just any other questions or corrections on the July 9th meeting notes? Okay, well with that then we can get started, and we have tonight with us 2 staff members from Coconino National Forest, Joshua and and it's Pat as well. So I have their presentation and I'm going to go ahead and get that up, but thank you both for joining us. And if you don't mind introducing yourselves while I get your presentation going, that would be great. I know we've already heard from you, but it would be.
Sure.
Let me very quickly ask everyone to mute themselves except for the presenters. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I said it already, but thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys this evening. My name is Josh Peck. I am the Deputy District Ranger on the Flagstaff Ranger District. I've been in the position almost a year now, so you are all probably much more experts on most of this than I am. I also, brought Pat with me because he knows way more than I do about recreation and trails in this area. So I'm going to run through the presentation here, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end, and that's where Pat will be the all-star and answer all those because he's better at that than I am. But Pat, I'll let you introduce yourself and then I'll get started.
All right, thanks, Josh. I'm Pat Gervey. I'm the recreation staff on the Flagstaff Ranger District. So I oversee all the trails and recreation programs we have around the Flagstaff area.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if anybody else is having a hard time, but it sounds like you're distant. You're kind of going near and distant a little bit.
Yeah, I have a problem with my microphone, so sorry about that. I was hoping it wouldn't act up. So we'll move on.
That's better. No, that's really good. That's better. You just keep it that level. That's great.
Great. So I've been here in the Flagstaff area for the last 10 years working in the recreation program in a lot of different functions. And I've worked with some of you guys here and there. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, so Melissa sent me a kind of teaser list of things that you guys might want to hear about. One of which is our current planning. And in regards to recreation, our current planning right now is really focused on the Mount Eldon Dry Lake Hills, or what we call Metal, which is definitely probably of interest to most of you, being right out your back door. So for those of you who've been around a lot longer than me, this metal process was originally started in 2013 and then put on the shelf as we prioritized the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project and focused our efforts on that. But we're starting to... Nope.
Joshua, could I interrupt? Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay, just tell me when to advance.
Okay. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, sorry. I have my screen with the presentation with my notes, and then I have your screen on the little side, so I didn't see it till just now. But anyways, so we shelved this project, the metal project, till we were well into the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project, and now that we're done with phase 1 and nearing the end of phase 2 of that, we're ready to dust this project off. And in fact, we started dusting it off at the beginning of this last year. So as part of dusting that off, the Flagstaff Trails Initiative convened a working group composed of a broad cross-section of recreational users within the area, mountain bikers, equestrians, hikers, runners, and then some environmental interests, some state trails folks. And the objective of that group, that working group, which started meeting last fall, was to build a recommendation with some consensus for the Forest Service to take into their proposed action. So that group delivered that information to us this past spring, right around April, May. So we utilized that along with the comments we received on the first proposed action in 2013, and then took another look at what we had in this area, and have developed a new proposed action. And I have in my notes here that, you know, the 2020 proposed action will be out in a couple weeks, but good news for all of you, you're on the cutting edge here. This will be out tomorrow. So you can expect some letters, emails, probably public notices in the paper about how to comment on this this planning process. So we're just getting started with the public scoping, and so it's a good time to be sitting here talking to you about this, because you all have an opportunity now to submit some comments. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So, you know, again, in metal, this is the east side of the planning process, and really the east side of this metal planning project area was focused on hiking trails and then equestrian use. So in 2013, we had a design for an equestrian system in the northeast corner of the planning area, and that was starting at Little Eldon and kind of branching out from there. And then the other piece of this was a loop trail system near Christmas Tree, starting kind of at Sandy Seat. So as some of the proposals that are in the proposed action would be to modify some of the trailheads, expand, add parking, and turnarounds, as well as look at the trail system itself, which we would consider, you know, adopting, maintaining, reconstructing, or getting rid of some of the trails to make a good system. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so just putting a plug in for the Flagstaff Trails Initiative. And this is not necessarily planning for us, but is a comprehensive regional plan for the Flagstaff area. And they've been working over the last 2 years to build a 501c3 that assists us land managers like the Forest Service with managing trails and helping to plan for a sustainable trail system. So they've concluded in the past, Pat will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but within the past 6 months, they've completed their kind of overall strategy planning document. And it does include some ideas and proposals for the Doney, Timberline, Fernwood areas. That plan is available and much more visible than what I've got in my presentation online at flagstafftrailsinitiative.org. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a is a snapshot of that east side of the metal planning project. It's trail proposals in this footprint were somewhat deliberately avoided during FDI because we knew we were going to start, or we knew we were having that metal planning process going on. And it was identified in FDI as probably the most critical place in Flagstaff to look at trail planning. So FDI provides us a lot of ideas, and of course, still the Forest Service has to make a decision on this with public's input as well. So definitely take a look at that Flagstaff Trail Initiative website. This is one of the maps that is on there, and you can pan around and look at what some of their recommendations were. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. So one of the other requests from Melissa was to walk us through, you know, well, how does a trail get started? And really, it starts with a good idea, or maybe a bad idea. We get some of those too, but really, it starts with somebody coming to us, or us internally coming up with a project proposal for a new trail or a place to put a trail. So typically, what we do is we'll kind of vet it internally with our interdisciplinary team, just to make sure there's no red flags from moving forward with the project. And then at that point, you know, we want to make sure it fits in with our long-term strategy, doesn't have potential to harm resources, and doesn't have potential to also create more unsustainable recreation use. So if we don't find any red flags, we typically move forward with the idea when it fits in with the Forest Service workload, which is another complexity that we have to deal with. We definitely have to prioritize our work. We have a lot going on, both from the recreation side of things, as well as restoration of ponderosa pine ecosystem, fire management, and a myriad of other things. So one of the steps for us is, of course, fitting it in with our workload. Once we take it up as part of our program of work, we go through the NEPA process, which I don't know how familiar folks are, but a pretty formalized process, which typically includes some sort of public outreach and public engagement. And then, you know, analysis of the environmental effects, as well as the social and political effects. Then what comes out of that is a decision to do the work. And then really, once the decision's there, it's again, another prioritization piece for us. And this is where we leverage a lot of work with volunteers and partners, both from the funding aspect and from the volunteer man-hour aspect. So always need money and bodies to get trail implementation done. And so, you know, this back end is where when the money and the bodies show up, it typically gets prioritized pretty highly. All right, let's go to the next slide. So just a quick snapshot. You know, it's hard to really put a exact number on how much trail construction, reconstruction, and maintenance cost, but as it can vary from type of crew and how long they're working, and you know, environment they're in, what kind of soil they're working in. All of those factors play into how much things can cost. But just for a general idea, you can see here, conservation crew, which is a crew we often use to help us with trail work, is about $6,500 for 4 days of work, or $13,000 for 8 days. So depending on, you know, the length of the trail, you can see there that, you know, the Hart Trail about $200,000 for 5 miles. I would say that's probably some more of was more difficult terrain to work in for that trail crew, but it really depends on you know, how far you have to go and the terrain you're in, but it can be quite expensive. And so that's where, you know, the partner dollars that come to play, and also the volunteer work is a huge boon to the Flagstaff Ranger District to getting trail work done. And I'll make the pitch that it will be a huge part of metal as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I kind of mentioned this, you know, both the construction we do is done a lot by the conservation crews, as well as some of our own employees. And then, you know, we have other crews that are similar to conservation crews that come in and work, as well as volunteers. So, you know, this year we've had the Arizona Conservation Crew, we've had Ancestral Lands Crew, we've had the Job Corps, and then our own internal crew all working on different trail projects on the district. So can't hit this enough, that how important those groups are to helping us get our projects done. And so one thing I'll touch on, maintenance of trails. So, you know, construction and reconstruction of trails are one part, but when you put them in place, you got to keep maintaining them. Otherwise they don't last. And so part of a sustainable trail system for us is having a network that we can actively maintain. And some of that is putting the trails in the right places where it's easier, less intensive, both time and money wise, to upkeep those, as well as, you know, having the right people to do the work. So you can see a few pictures here of our trail crew doing some work on the Schultz Creek, and also cutting some trees. That's probably off, I want to say Brookbank. That's my guess, Pat, but you can tell me later I'm wrong. But just a few pictures of some of the work that we did with our internal crew this past summer. All right, next slide, please. So I've hit on this a bunch, and, you know, Flagstaff is a unique place because there are often opportunities to get involved from a volunteer aspect. There's almost, in a normal year, there's a volunteer event almost every weekend to help maintain trails. The other thing I'll pitch, you know, Flagstaff Trails Initiative is FTI, as we call it. It's a variety of volunteer base, looking for a variety of volunteers, excuse me, for all kinds of things, all kinds of skill sets, physical labor, money raising, graphic design, all kinds of things. So if you're interested in being part of the Flagstaff Trails Initiative and also helping out, that's a good way to get involved. One other thing I didn't have a slide for, but Melissa, this was another thing that I caught towards the end. One of the reasons we're interested in metal, and I mentioned it, was sustainable trail planning. And so part of that is addressing some of the social trails that we have out there. And so social trails for us, you know, usually, well, not usually, but sometimes can be in unsustainable locations. And when they're in that location, they have potential to cause resource damage. They're usually not planned or designed, which again makes them, if we were to maintain them, which we do not, it would be more of a maintenance hassle. But also, again, as they start to degrade, can start to cause resource damage, potential to run off water, things like that. And then the other thing, social trails for us is complicated because it tends to confuse people. When there's a myriad of trails out there, it's hard for folks to find out where the actual trail is. And sometimes the social trails are in a better location than the Forest Service Trail, or even easier to access. And so people just start using that out of ease. So touched on the why we want to look at social trails in the metal project, and we are going to look at social trails within the metal project, look at potentially decommissioning some of those. And one of the other things that we're focused on pretty heavily in metal is to add appropriate signing to our system trails so that folks can find it easier to move through there. And then the last piece I'll mention about social trails is it seems like where you get one, then you get 50 more. It seems like when you have one, that it just promotes people for doing more. That's the end of my presentation. Melissa, I did look up some of the stuff about land exchanges if you want me to go through that quickly. I don't have a slide, so it'd be very wordy, but maybe we'll pause and see if folks have questions about trails on the Flagstaff Ranger District. And then we can talk about land exchanges later. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So
I have a question concerning, you mentioned the labeling of trails. We have some problems with Google Maps. I'm looking at your trails website right now, and one of your major proposed trail systems begins at Forest Road 776, which enters from Highway 89, just a half mile south of our neighborhood. But the campers have been getting lost because Google has our own driveway marked to 776. So all of the traffic that wants to go camping back on your trail 776 is coming up our driveway and at late hours, and wondering if you could contact Google. We have made many attempts. If you could contact Google and officially have them remove these erroneous marks that are getting campers lost in our yard, in our neighbor's yard, and a couple of other neighbors. This is a private driveway neighborhood, not a public forest system. We're hoping you could handle that.
Can't say that I've ever asked Google to do that before, but we can certainly look into it and see if that's something that we can do.
Thank you.
Is that Girls Ranch Road?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing issue.
We have 8 erroneous trail markers in our driveways we'd like to have removed, and Google has not been successful in our attempts to make those changes already.
Thanks for bringing that up. Were there any other questions regarding trails planning on forest land?
Well, it's Liz, and just in regards to that, and so, Josh, if you would just maintain communication with me too, that would be great, because maybe we need to combine forces on that too, and our IT department, or maybe we need to get, I mean, I could certainly elevate it to even a congressional level, you know, so, and, you know, maybe it would be necessary, who knows, but if you just keep me in the loop and let's see how we can get this accomplished.
Sure, I would say your avenues are probably faster than ours for getting that accomplished. If we need to go congressionally, it's probably I can almost say with certainty that your avenues would probably be more responsive and faster than ours in getting that addressed.
Well, if you could find out if the Forest Service has done this before, because I mean, obviously it's not, I mean, we're still going to need to, I would still need to have like Forest Service approval saying this is not an access to the forest. And there's probably going to have to be some kind of letter or documentation from the Forest Service that would confirm that. But if we just like maybe bring it to Laura Jo's attention and see if she's, I mean, I'm sure this is not the only time this has come up on a national level, and she probably has colleagues in other areas that have had to deal with this. And so if you would just start it first on your end and then let me know what I can do to support, or if you run into a dead end, then I can work with Laura Jo on what we need to do next.
Sure, sounds good.
Thanks.
I have one question, Josh. This is Brian Bates. And that is, I've had a lot of people ask about trails, and some of them are interested in, is there any connectivity? Is there any coordination between the county with the roads and some of the county trails and the Forest Service that would create connectivity between Forest Service trails and then perhaps folks that are bicycling from point A to B, where they could take and drop off a vehicle at the end of their trail?
So I'll take a stab at this one, and then Pat, you can jump in and correct me. But definitely a consideration within the meadow planning process is connectivity, at least across Forest Service land. We've been in a lot of contact with both the city and the county folks about making sure we connect where it makes sense. And some of the discussion we had with Martin at the city was about providing some different types of experiences, and we were talking specifically about that pipeline trail, and so I'd say yes, we are in contact with those folks, and definitely something we're interested in is connecting where it makes sense and giving people a good experience from one side of Flagstaff all the way to the other. And so some of this meadow planning process will definitely help that connectivity a lot. And then it's just continuing conversations with those folks.
Yeah, I have one quick question. This is Harriet, Girls Ranch Road again. I've often thought that, you know, we're at the end of everything. It might be possible for us to form a small volunteer committee on big weekends to hand out little maps about how close people are to houses. I don't think the people coming up from the south know there's a housing community immediately north of where they turn off. And the people coming down from the north don't know that there's a housing community immediately to the south. We're not visible to them. And maybe on bad weekends, 4th of July, Memorial, Labor Day, we could have a volunteer team out there just handing out maps saying, just letting you know where people are so you can be careful and not shoot in our backyards. But we could be volunteers, and would that be a possible volunteer job that you could look at?
I think that sounds like a good idea to me. And Pat, feel free to jump in and tell me I'm wrong, but that seems like a good idea to me. And you know, it's really a volunteer group that's helping yourselves out. So, well, I'll have to ask Pat. I'll defer to Pat on that one.
Yeah, we have some similar programs across the state and across the forest. And one of the more successful programs is the OHV Ambassador Program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've had a hard time starting that in northern Arizona, but if we had some local interest, there's some really good resources to get somebody like that out in that area to pass on whatever kind of safety messaging we want to do.
Yeah, because there need to be some safety messages out here because we get so many more people now than we ever used to. And I think it's because they think we're more remote and that there's less, I don't know, less supervision or something, but there's sort of an instinct to run wild. And we'd like a little bit more control. Thank you.
I have a question. Do you have any plans for the Turkey Hills area?
Bernice, you're cutting out.
Or around Mountain View Ranchos or?
Bernice, we lost most of that question. Sorry.
Oops. I was wondering about the Turkey Hills, Mountain View Ranchos, or Cosmino area. Do you have any?
Hey, Bernice, I don't think we heard that whole question, but I did hear Turkey Hills, and we know that's a popular area to recreate, both for motorized and non-motorized users. We've been mostly focused on restoration out there, trying to close some of those unauthorized routes. You know, it's an interesting piece of property out there with the state land combined in the middle of it. Right now, that's not on our top priority for a trail system, but I think that could help better manage that area in the future.
Hey, Josh, or Pat, I have a quick question for you. This has come up before. This is Sailor. This has come up before, but I would just like to mention it since you're on the phone. We've talked a little bit about Forest Service access being blocked. Bless you. Was that a sneeze, Melissa?
Sorry, it's paper. I'll mute.
Oh, okay. So private property, when things change, blocking Forest Service access. So if there is a Forest Service road that's on the map, the use map, and it's open to the public, how do you have a way of dealing with private property owners, or is that acceptable for them to block that access, or how does that work? We've talked a little bit about it, but not sure from your perspective what your take on that is.
Sure. So really, it comes down to whether or not the Forest Service has an easement on that road. If it's on our motor vehicle use map, likely we do, but it'd be something we'd have to check into, make sure that the records match, that we have an easement. But If we do not have an easement, it is perfectly within their right to block that road. And that's why we mostly want some of those easements in place so we can access some of that hard to access area. But that's the short answer. The simple answer is it comes down to whether the Forest Service has some sort of legal right to the road, which would be in the form of an easement in most cases where it crosses private land.
Okay, I don't have anything particular in mind, but in the event that there was a question about a particular access to a particular trailer road, who handles that sort of thing?
Typically, those initial requests might come to me or Deirdre McLaughlin, who is our lands and special use person at the SO. And it really depends on the type of question. But
Okay.
Deirdre, D is what we call her. She's usually the one that has the most knowledge about that, and she can take that initial look. But you can certainly contact me as well. I get a lot of those inquiries, and then forward them to the appropriate party.
Okay, great. That's a great answer. Like I said, I don't have anything in particular in mind, but it has come up a few times on this call, people's frustration with loss of Forest Service access. So thank you.
Yeah, I just share too that sometimes it's not just the Forest Service that has the easement. Sometimes it's up to the county or the municipality to get to the Forest Service boundary. And I think that's happened in some situations where the county actually holds the easement to get across somebody's private land to have public access to the national forest.
Thank you very much. Very excited about the initiative, by the way. I'm a huge trail user, hiker, biker, very excited. So I just want to thank you for the presentation and really excited about it.
If I could just interrupt very quickly, I just want to introduce Rob Wilson did join us a bit ago, and also Bernice Carver. So welcome to the meeting. Thanks for joining in. And Rob, Brian has been guiding us through the agenda, but now that you're here, we will.
Well, since I don't know where we are on the agenda or what has and has not been discussed, if Brian doesn't object, I'd like to allow that to continue so that we can improve the efficiency here, and I hope everyone will accept my apologies for my tardiness.
No apologies necessary. We'll roll with what we've started.
Let me ask, first of all, welcome, Rob. And if you want to take over, you're welcome, but I don't have any problem following through. Josh, on these legal access roads, I've had several folks in my community say that they have traffic on what they thought was a foot trail, and it's motorized traffic. Would those inquiries come to you then?
You can certainly either myself or Matt McGrath, the other ranger, or you can certainly send those to the front desk and they'll get distributed to the appropriate people. Often that would be Pat, but also one of our engineers looks into that stuff sometimes. But really, it's getting it to the Forest Service, and then we'll do some of the legwork to figure out where you're talking about and get it to the appropriate party to look into. But
so Matt DeGraff is the other individual.
Correct.
Okay. I have another question that has come from community members, and that is that a lot of people go out and shoot in the during the summer and so forth, and many of them are careful. I've only had one instance of someone not being careful, but the question has been, what is how do I ask this? It's legal to shoot in the forest. Is there any way that the Forest Service can try to make sure that people who are shooting are not close to residences? Because that's been one of the concerns I've heard from folks out on Slayton Ranch Road.
Amen. Girls Ranch Road too.
Yeah, that is definitely a valid concern. What I've seen in the past is actually putting signs up on trees within 50 feet of private property that say, you know, avoid shooting here. There's private beyond this. I can't say that that was either the Forest Service or the private landowners that did that. I'm not sure.
Hey, Josh?
I don't have anything at my fingertips right now of what we're doing to manage that, but it's certainly a concern that we'll look into.
It's my understanding that the rule by the Arizona state law is 1,250 feet from an occupied residence, or from a residence, I guess. It doesn't even have to be occupied. Is that consistent, Josh, with what you think or know?
That's beyond my knowledge level. So if that's, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's my understanding. The Arizona state law says that that's the rule. It's buried pretty deeply. It's somewhat ambiguous. It's subject to interpretation by some folks, but being able to define where that 1,250 foot boundary is, perhaps even on, you know, the National Forest use maps that show authorized trails and things like that, it would be a good addition on that map if that in fact is the law, to show that line so that folks would know where that is.
And we can do a better job of educating about the law and where the lines are. That would be just an educational process.
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. I'm just not that familiar with either the law or if we have any policy that directs that. So I'll certainly look into that.
Just a quick comment on it, Rob. It's the statute actually says a quarter mile. That's 1,320 feet.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. The state law is more stringent than the Forest Service policy. The Forest Service policy across the nation is 100 yards, I believe. It's extremely close. So the state definitely has a better safety rule there.
Pat, does the state law apply even though it's on federal land?
It does, but not all of our officers can write that citation.
Gotcha.
The federal officers.
Am I correct in stating that there's never shooting allowed on state land?
I don't know the rules on state land. Maybe Rob does, it looks like.
Yeah,
We'd have to check with the state lands department on that.
In accordance with state law, it is legal, as far as I know. But I am not an attorney, nor am I giving legal advice.
I can give you a little bit of information on that. What you need, I don't know what the provisions for a recreational use permit are, which you have to have, or you will need a hunting permit, depending on what's in season. Otherwise, you are trespassing on state land. So consider those provisions. You can go to the Game and Fish website, and it's explained rather well there. I have some experience with a friend of mine who was cited and fined for doing something like that several years ago. So that's where my knowledge of what you can and can't do on state land came from. State is much more restrictive than the Forest Service.
Thanks, John, holder of all knowledge. Did anyone else have questions on the trails topic before we?
Yeah, yes. Melissa, this is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Trails, it looks like every time we see the maps, they're around the Mount Eldon up North 89. Some of them are out in the center of Doney Park. Is there anything earmarked for the southern part of the Forest Service out in the Cosnino Loop, Winona area on Forest Service land? Is there any trails that are being looked at to go in out in that area? Foot trails, bike trails, equestrian trails, things like that.
Pat, you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. Right now, I don't think we have those in our targets as priorities. There has been discussion about loop opportunities off the Arizona Trail out on that side of town, but no firm proposals. And personally, I haven't heard a huge amount of community support for that. And so it'd be great to hear those ideas. And I'd be happy to talk to residents out there about what opportunities could exist in that area. It'd be great for you to check out the Flagstaff Trail Initiative map, and there's basically a recommendation and comment box on that map, and you can click that on and look in that specific area and see if others had commented or recommended anything out in that area. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Thanks, Pat. Does somebody else have a question?
Yes, this is Steve for Josh. I was wondering, back to the topic of shooting range, what the Forest Service, their thoughts and stance were on a free shooting range. On a survey that was given to the Doney Park area, that was very important, shooting range. We've been losing local shooting ranges here. And my response back would be, you'd think that the Forest Service would want designated spots where they could kind of control where us sportsmen go to partake of our sport. And what is it, would the Forest Service consider locations that could be deemed safe and, watch? I would be a lifetime volunteer to a project like that, sir.
So, I think as we're starting to see that use increase quite a bit, and it is certainly applicable to think about certain designated areas for shooting. I don't think we're opposed to it, but again, it has to fit within our priorities and within our plan of work. And like I said, we haven't had an opportunity to look much beyond the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project and now Metal. So I don't think we'd be opposed to it, but we'd have to think through that if a proposal came through. And I don't.
Yeah, I just
okay. And on that, could I just interrupt here for a second? So, Josh, would there be an opportunity within the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood planning area for something like that, or is that something that would be likely beyond our planning boundaries?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Pat, have we considered any of those in the past?
The Forest Service nationally is fairly gun shy of providing those developed shooting ranges. Where we do see that is when we have a strong partner that proposes something, and then we can issue them a special use permit, and they can carry the liability and a bond typically. Typically, there's a large amount of environmental concern over lead and the remediation costs after that. So we see partners like Game and Fish across the state. Sometimes they'll manage a shooting range on national forest, or sometimes some smaller nonprofits will do it. But typically, not a Forest Service held operation run by volunteers. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's quite a big process.
Thanks for that. I am mindful of the time. Were there any other questions on the trails planning that's going on with the Forest Service? Because while we have Josh and Pat with us, we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the land exchange particulars.
Hey, Melissa, is there a way I can link or send a message to everyone so they have a link to that project website so they can make comments?
There is. Just go into the chat.
Yeah, it was only going to you for some reason.
Oh, okay. Well, if you send it, actually, maybe just email it to me later.
Okay. Yeah, if you can send it out to this group,
I'll do
I'll make
that.
sure you have the press release with all the information if you can share that, and we'll be taking comments until September 28th on that proposal. So looking forward to all you guys participating. Thank you.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Josh, did you want to touch on the land exchange process briefly? Because we're going to be looking at this in a bit, just later on this agenda.
I can certainly throw out what I know, which is what I researched in the past couple hours. So typically our land exchange goes to the regional office. We have a lands adjustment board that handles any sorts of land exchange projects. So my familiarity with it is low, but I think I can provide you guys some insight. So Forest Service land exchanges, really the Forest Service, it's not a thing that the Forest Service seeks out, but it's proponent driven. So, you know, if there was a ranch or something that somebody wanted to get rid of, they usually bring a proposal to the Forest Service. So we're not out actively looking for places that we want to exchange. Some of the considerations we have to go through, you know, there's a lot of rules and restrictions on land exchanges for us. And I don't have all those at my fingertips, but some of the ones that we're really cognizant of course, have to do with sensitive cultural resources, threatened and endangered species, wetlands, and then recreation access. So typically, you know, if we stand to lose any of those types of things in a land exchange, that's probably not going to pan out very well, or pan out to where we would look at doing that land exchange. The other thing to know, in the general sense of land exchanges, they can take a very long time, anywhere from 2 to 4 to 10 years. They're not a quick process because it's a very lengthy process to go through. So just so that information's out there. But most of what we see in land exchanges and what we have on the books right now are congressionally mandated land exchanges. So the Northern Arizona Land Exchange, which is didn't exchange land directly, but directed the Forest Service to sell off some parcels of land, such as the Lake Mary water treatment plant. That's typically what we see a lot of in land exchange world, some of that congressionally mandated stuff. That's the general overview of land exchanges. I'll go through the process really quickly. And like I mentioned, starts with a proposal to exchange land. And then we jump into a feasibility analysis, which is that initial look at the political, social, environmental landscape, and just seeing if there's any, like I mentioned with the trail planning, if there's any red flags to moving forward. And typically that's a decision point for the Forest Service to look at what they might get in the public interest at that point. So if the land exchange is not going to be in the public interest, general public interest, it's going to be stopped right then. We're not going to move it forward. Then we do what's called an agreement to initiate, which is basically saying we're going to initiate this land exchange. It's an informal, I won't say informal, but it's a non-binding document at that point, because there's still several steps in the process. After the agreement to initiate, there's a legal notice, which kicks off a public comment period for that. And then we go into, we have to do a NEPA on this sort of action too. So then there's another public comment period. Sorry. And while the NEPA process is going on, there's a valuation process, which, you know, appraising the land. And so again, another checkpoint for the Forest Service. We can't exchange land unless it's equal value or the difference is made up with cash, and it can only be made up in about 25% cash. After that, it's decision point. Agency issues a decision, and you know, whatever that's 5 years down the road, then it's really just, you know, sign in the few legal documents at that point, and and a binding exchange agreement. And then typically not too long after that decision's issued that, things are finalized. But like I said, it can take a very long time. And that's the general overview of the land exchange process with the Forest Service. I'll mention the other types of, I won't say land exchange, but land issues we deal with, buying and selling. So typically the Forest Service does not sell land unless it's mandated by Congress. And then, buying, where we look at buying parcels. So one of the great things that happened in the Great American Outdoors Act, just signed recently, was making permanent the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a permanent fund for the Forest Service to buy parcels of land that are in the public interest. So typically we look at those same aspects of high recreation value, threatened and endangered species habitat, wetlands, or high value cultural resources. So that's the other type of lands transactions we typically get into. And I'm going to stop there. And if people have questions, I will probably write them down and try and get answers for you, because this is not my expertise. But
well, Josh, that's actually really helpful. And I think that we just wanted a general overview of the process, because, and you've probably seen the map, there is, quite a bit of Forest Service land that surrounds our planning area, but also that is within it. So, I know that it's come up as some questions, since we really appreciate your sharing that with us. Did anyone else have questions on that, on the exchange process?
Let me ask, if I may, if there are any land exchange proposals that currently exist within the Doney Park, Fernwood, Timberline planning area. And if you don't know, if you could find out for us.
I will double check, but I'm speculating no, unless there's something included in that Northern Arizona Land Exchange congressional. Right. There may be some, I'd have to go back and see all the lands actions we're doing. There may be some like small tracts adjustments, which is not a land exchange, but a purchase of Forest Service land based on the Small Tracts Act. So there might be some of that going on, but I'm not aware of any land exchange, but I will double check for you.
Yes, I think that the committee would like to know if there are any proposed or any anticipated within our planning area. Anyone else have a question?
So I actually have a question for, maybe it's Melissa, but can you get me a map of that planning area?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else questions on, I know there are many, many topics around Forest Service that we could cover, but I think these were the main headings that we've heard about over the past several months. Did anyone else have any questions? I know Josh and Pat maybe would like to exit the meeting. So.
One quick question, and if it's already been asked, then I'll retract it. And that is, I know there were some thinning projects that had originally been scheduled for the western border of our planning area. And as a result of the Schultz fire, those were canceled. There is still remaining forest that needs to be thinned, and it is the only remaining buffer now between the urban forest interface there. Are there any plans in the future to perhaps do any thinning in that area?
I can't say for certain without knowing where the western edge of your planning area is. I haven't looked at it, and I apologize for that.
West of 89, yeah.
But I can double check, but I'm speculating no on that as well. But maybe, okay. Pat, do you know?
It looks like he stepped away.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will double check for you, but I think not at this point.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Just to follow up to Rob's last question, is this where you're concerned about the threat of that being on fire that we talked about several times ago?
Can you restate that question? I'm not sure I heard you.
No, I'm talking to Rob.
Oh,
Yeah, Dave, yes, that would be the case. My concern is that it was originally scheduled for thinning. The Schultz fire destroyed the majority of what was going to be thinned, but there is still standing overly dense forest, and it is now the only buffer that we have left. And so, the question is, would there be any way to get that done to preserve that, because it is so important now, especially with respect to flooding?
Thanks for that question. I think that follows up on some of the conversation we had when flood control talked to us. So we'll follow up on that, Rob. Okay, well, with that then, Josh and Pat, you're welcome to stay with us.
It's family and dinner time for me, but
I
appreciate
understand.
the invitation. But I really do want to thank you all for letting us come talk to you. And like I said, we're at a critical point for public input into a big trail planning process that you guys are right on the edge of. So we really appreciate your feedback in that and any comments you might have. So and again, thanks for the invite. And if we have more questions, feel free to send them my way, and I will figure them out. And
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'll be in touch with.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh, Pat. Melissa, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I think we were to go on to review of, maybe get the key points that we've just heard and then take a break. Would that be appropriate?
That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen and go back to the other one.
Rob, do you want to take over?
I don't know what's happened, and so I would prefer not to, because I don't want to make the
That's
same.
fine.
Okay, so we were here on our agenda with the presentation, and then we will go ahead and just go around the committee and just capture the key presentation points that we just heard that we want to make sure are reflected in the document, in the area plan. So this is for the committee to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we keep alive that interface connection between the Forest Service and the residences, and make sure that the people who use the recreational areas are well aware of where they are in relation to housing. It's just really important when you live in one of those houses.
Harriet, in response to what you shared, I'm wondering if the Friends of the Forest would be an organization for you to reach out to.
Okay.
I can talk to you off, later and give you some information about them, but I think that's an organization that may be helpful.
Let's talk about that. Thank you.
Any other key points we want to capture?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll talk fast. I just think it's very important that when there are Forest Service exchanges and Forest Service land, that the trails are not blocked off, that there are easements that are put in the property that's exchanged, so that for public access.
Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing here. Dave brought up a good question about gateways. And one thing I would like to mention is we spent a lot of time during the revision of the comprehensive plan discussing this and the importance of gateways. Highway 89 is only one gateway that we are dealing with. Part of I-40 is I-40 east of Flagstaff. But looking at the big picture, that it's more than just those. My point of view is that 89 is a gateway whether we like it or not. It's simply a major route from the Grand Canyon into Flagstaff. And as such, I think that is the best way to address it. That's what people are going, that's the way people are going to drive. That's what they're going to see. Another good point about that was it's also a gateway going out of Flagstaff through Doney Park to the Grand Canyon or the reservation. So in that respect, I think we have a gateway, whether we like it or not. It's a gateway by default also.
Thanks, John.
You
Anybody else?
Melissa, one thing that I heard was that there is coordination between the Forest Service and the county. My sense was that my understanding of the response was that it's not extensive, but that we might want to look at how we could create better connectivity and cooperation between the county and the Forest Service.
Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, this is Liz, and I think part of that would be more an exploration of resources available than anything else. I mean, I feel like there's great cooperation between the county and the Forest Service. I mean, obviously, like with any relationship, we're not going to agree on everything, and sometimes we do have to, many times we have to push the envelope with the Forest Service, and sometimes we go for congressional remedies. But I think in terms of specifically trails, you know, we did have the C-Post money, which was the, you know, residents who went to a ballot. We took it to a ballot initiative, and the residents agreed to literally tax themselves for us to be able to have some parks and open space. And we did have some trails planned that would go from District 2 to just through District 4 and connect, and through Forest Service, and also connect to some of the Flagstaff urban trails. But and this, you know, probably predates some of you in your residency here, but what happened is that as time passed, a lot of the residents especially in District 4 did not want to have those trails after all. And so we had the resources then to be able to do it. We don't have the resources now. That doesn't mean that we couldn't come up with the resources and try to brainstorm some funding mechanisms. And certainly times have changed, and I'm hearing more and more of a desire to have trails and coordinating that again with the Forest Service. But I think in the notes, it also has to be exploration of resources.
What I hear and what I seem to be hearing is that there's more and more of these, let's just say, issues that come up that come up outside activities, people doing things and so on. And it doesn't seem to me like there's a particular place to go to say, okay, can you guys get together and work this out? And I just, if that's what the resources you say you need is for people, you know, someone to pay attention to this stuff, then yeah, then I think it's an important use of resources.
Do we have other comments?
Melissa, this is Steve. I would just like to add to what Bernice said of how important it is for access with these easements to the Forest Service. I could physically walk across the road and use an easement on a street, but because of the people that live up in there, they have denied that. And it, even with Sheriff Driscoll, he's had such an issue with these people that it is suggested, and for the last 20 years, I have been forced to just go a different route and go miles out of my way in order to pacify, you know, my neighbor.
So Steve, that sounds like it's a very specific easement issue that maybe we should talk about later, so we could understand a little bit more where you're referring to.
Right. And I'm sure, you know, if it happens in one spot, and just like Bernice said, that I'm sure some people, they just kind of feel like if they live where there's an easement, that they just kind of call the shots, whether it's either used or not. And we're talking foot traffic even. So I was basically told that was, you know, just stay away. And with Sheriff Driscoll, when I've asked him several times, and he's like, well, these people are just impossible to deal with. It is a legal easement to the forest, and what I suggest, it just do something different.
Right. That is a difficult situation, and I don't have a great answer for that at this moment. But if it is a formal easement and it is intended to provide access into the forest, and there are people that are blocking it off or creating other barriers, then it does sound like the Sheriff's Department, they would be the appropriate entity to deal with that. And it sounds like it's some ongoing issues that I don't know that we'll address with the area plan, but it's a good topic to understand that it is something to work on.
Right. And those just noted that those situations do arise out here.
Thank you. And I think education is a key part of that in a lot of ways. And I think that this area plan will probably be making, you know, some recommendations about ongoing volunteer education efforts. So that might go a long way.
No, Melissa, one thing that comes to mind is the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission has to deal with this occasionally, and it's mostly in regards to a subdivision. And typically people ask for access to the forest where perhaps the Forest Service doesn't want it. We've heard a lot about social trails, and the problem has been, well, if we create additional access via easements in a subdivision, that it will create more of those trails. So one thing that I think Liz emphasized, the county's had a good working relationship with the Forest Service, and these things come to light when we do the planning for subdivisions. And that's primarily where we at the Planning and Zoning Commission will see this sort of thing come up, just as an informational bit for everyone.
Thanks, John. That's an important point. And that is an opportunity to plan for these access points, because when a discretionary project like a subdivision comes up, then that's when planning staff is talking with the Forest Service about whether or not that access would be desirable in their bigger plans. So those are opportunities to look for. Any other thoughts on the key presentation points, and then we can take a quick break. Again, I am watching our time here, and we have quite a bit more to get through on the agenda. Anybody else?
I would suggest that we document the process by which the land exchange occurs. I think that that's something important to put into the document so that it is on the record.
Could I make a suggestion there, Brian, on that? I think it is important to perhaps include references to these documents where that information is provided. But if we put it in the regional plan and then it changes the next year, then we've got something that could be 10 years old and incorrect. So I think we may be better served by referencing the documents or the locations of these documents that define the processes rather than include them in ours.
I think that that's a good point. I agree.
Rob's absolutely correct due to the rather political nature of some of these land exchanges, especially in the past. And we could see more of the political nature of those going forward. I don't know, but Rob is absolutely correct about that.
No, my objective was to make sure that it's documented, and I think that references are probably the better way to go. So hearing nothing else, I suggest we take a 7-minute break.
Brian, can I add one more thing?
Certainly.
Trails. they had a map of proposed trails, and should put in the flagstafftrailinitiative.org link also with a map that shows projected trails as a possible location of trails, and to follow the initiative's website to see if those are going to go.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Jim. I believe that was Jim.
Yeah, I think Jim well knows that would be very useful for those of us who are on the Planning and Zoning Commission when we look at some of the plans that people are asking for access to those trails or the potential access to them. So thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
So Melissa, should we move to a short break?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, there you go.
So
I'll third it.
All righty. Let's take, I'm going to say 5 minutes, and we will definitely start within 7 minutes.
Okay, so it's 6:31. We will come back together at 6:36.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
See you in 5.
Mr. Wilson, can you hear me? This is Steve.
Yes, I can.
Yes, sir. I was just kind of curious. At your store, do you happen to have a 45 Colt in a Generation 1 or 2?
We do not.
Okay. I happen to end up acquiring a APC cylinder for one, and I was just curious if you had one.
No, we have almost nothing right now in the retail end of our store. It's really sad.
Oh, 10-4, I might have to come with you. I'm getting old and I got nobody to inherit some stuff, so maybe I'll come down your way.
We're always looking for some healthy, safe queens.
10-4. Thank you. Yeah.
How is everybody?
Here and ready to go.
Ready to go? Okay, we'll wait 1 minute. As soon as Brian gets back. Now the fun will begin.
This is what we've been building up to for the last 7 months, right?
We're doing great, Melissa. Thank you.
This is where we find out
Jay.
who's
Thank
been reading the area plan.
You've been reading the area plan, John?
Well, let's see. Got started on that about 9.5 years ago.
Have you memorized it yet?
No, not quite. I kind of have the outlook Einstein had towards phone books, and that is why remember a telephone number when you know where you can look it up. Takes up it wastes space.
Brain space. Hello, Bob. You're recently joining us.
Yes.
Welcome. We're just taking a quick break. We'll get started here in 1 minute, and then maybe we'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Melissa, did we have anybody else join us?
We, so let's see. Evelyn joined us. And I did have an email from Liz Baldwin. She is out of town. So the only committee member who has not joined tonight is Rich Ferguson. And I think he's been having some connection issues.
Melissa, I have a question. This is Evelyn.
Hi.
Did you send the minutes?
I sent them in the email last week. Yes.
Okay, I was just looking for them and I couldn't find them. I thought you did, but I couldn't find them, so I'll just.
Okay.
Okay. But I'm here.
I'll resend them to you.
Okay, thanks.
Did everybody else get the meeting notes from last time?
Yeah, I've got a copy of them sitting right here beside me. No problem.
I got them also.
I'll resend those to you.
Since we seem to have a minute here, I just wanted to thank Brian for your efforts as a citizen and running for office. I'm sorry to see the results, but I wanted to say thank you for taking the effort and initiative to do that, because it's a ton of work, I know, and that's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Rob. And yeah, the results didn't come the way I anticipated, but then, you know, there's an old saying, you never know what the voters are going to say.
That's proven over and over again.
Yeah, but I'll still be involved.
Yeah, nice work, Brian. I was sorry to see that as well.
Thank you.
I'll second Rob's comments on that too.
Okay,
Well,
it's 6:39, Brian.
Melissa, I found it. Never mind.
It was a
Okay.
good effort, Brian.
I found my minutes. Never mind.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And this is real, Teresa, I'm going to interject just for a moment. Supervisor Archuleta had to go to a meeting with the school for her son. So she has left this meeting and won't be able to join us again.
But we still have Teresa.
I am still here. And if there's any questions that I can't answer, I can definitely get her back online.
Thank you, Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, would you put our agenda back up so folks can see where we're going, including the guy that's supposed to know where we're going?
Here we are.
Okay, so
we're right here.
Did we capture our
Oops, sorry.
Did we capture the key presentation points
I believe we did.
Okay. I want to share something very quickly, if I may, and that is I was looking back through all of the different minutes that we have, and I want to thank Melissa for doing an excellent job on that.
Oh, well, that's Jessica. Just remember, Jessica's doing the notes.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
And as I was doing it, I was looking at, bigger picture things, and Melissa, you've done a good job of breaking out different categories for us. And I came up with a couple of different ideas, and that is, what is it that we want to preserve? What are the key issues we face? What do we need to change? And what results do we want to achieve? And I know there are other criteria, but those are 4 that just kind of popped out of my brain this afternoon. And I'm certainly open to other people offering different objectives as well. But with that, I'd like to start with the visioning process. And Melissa, do you have the slides like you had last month?
Are you seeing this?
Yes, I am. An overall image of what Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood aspires to be.
Right, and this is just to refresh. So we will pick up where we left off on the visioning exercise from last month. And this is just a refresher to think about what a vision is. And it is what Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood aspires to be now and in the future. And we're thinking 20 years ahead. So what are the values? What's the inspiration? And how are we going to describe that? And again, these are from our initial meeting and the focus group that we did with you all. What is Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood to you? Let me know if you want me to linger on this slide or if I should move to the next. Move to the next.
Yep, move, please.
What is important to you? These were the characteristics that were important to you as a committee in terms of preserving in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood.
Looks good.
Move to the next, okay. Challenges or issues. So these are some of the things Brian just brought up. Again, this is from back in January when we first met, and we have talked about many of these over the months we've been meeting. Are you ready for the next slide? And then finally, the image, the famous Jess McNeely drawn elk on the road.
That's so perfect.
And so again, we were looking at creating a 4-part vision statement last month. We looked at natural resources, open space and environment, and community character and values. And then tonight, we are going to dive into the land use growth, development and partnerships, and transportation. And I do have a recap of what your comments were on natural resources, open space, environment, and community character. We're not going to spend time wordsmithing this tonight. We'll do that next month. I've taken these statements and drafted a vision for you. And like I said, we will look at that and wordsmith this next month. But this is just to kind of get us in the mindset of creating a vision statement for these other categories.
Melissa, I have something I'd like to ask you relative to that. In reviewing the beginning of the Doney Park area plan, that a vision statement is the one thing that is missing from the current area plan. And my question would be, where is the most appropriate place to put that vision statement? Should it be part of what is now referred to in the table of contents as the introduction, which covers a lot of what you just presented? Just something to think about, and I think for everyone else to think about.
So you're actually asking where in the document it would be, where it would fit in.
Right, and I think it right up front somewhere is probably the best place for it, because you want to know, what do people want to see Doney Park become in the future? What do they want?
And John, that's very consistent with how the other newer area plans have been organized. So we'll look at that, and we've got a draft table of contents that you all will chime in on.
I've got some definite opinions for you on that when you get there. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so this was that, and then on community character and values, there was the discussion on the design review overlay as a way to maintain some of the community character, but then also the idea of the gateway and what that means for Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. Like I said, next month we'll look closely at a draft vision for this, but I wanted to recap what was covered. And this is right out of the meeting notes. So if you had an interest in going back and seeing those, refreshing your thoughts on what that would mean, we can certainly add to that next month. So with that, I thought we could jump right into land use, growth, development, and partnerships. And what does this mean? And this is where we need you all to chime in and tell us, fill in some of these blanks. And I've given you some pretty, I guess, directive prompts and to get you thinking about what this vision would look like for Doney Park. So is Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood a community that supports growth? If it is, what kind of growth is that? What does it look like? Does that include commercial, public, semi-public, and industrial development opportunities? Does it include housing choices for multiple generations? Does it include different housing types? So these are some of the these are some of the topics that this type of vision would cover, and then it would be further detailed in the land use chapter and the policies that are in that. So we've heard a lot about different topics related to this, such as water service, transportation system, and I'm going to just let you ask some questions and think about what would this look like. What do you as a community want Doney Park to look like in 20 years in terms of land use, growth, development? I will say just with the Belmont project, they ended up, because there wasn't a final, or there was not an initial consensus on what the vision for this would be. So we ended up with different scenarios and worked through a scenario planning process because that was important for them. And then that was actually added to the survey. Because this can be, this type of vision leads directly into those land use policies that are then used to make decisions on conditional use permits, on subdivisions, on rezonings, possibly land exchanges if the Forest Service is looking at those. So this is a big topic, and I'll stop talking now.
I'll add something to that. I think that this is something that's been discussed before, and that is the very distinct neighborhoods that Doney Park composes and how to address some of that. I think we've got more than one of us going here. Anyway, I had brought that up, and I think you're familiar with this, Melissa, and Don Walters on the Planning and Zoning Commission had also brought this up. And I think that rather than attempting to do anything like delineate different areas that have their own distinct makeups, that this is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed when design reviews are done. There's a lot in the area plan as it is right now relating to what you need to consider. And these are the things that mostly apply to commercial development or things like multifamily housing, for instance. So that's, I think, an important consideration as we go forward.
Could you just... Has anybody driven from 179 up to Prescott, through Prescott Valley recently, where it's just one national chain after another all along that route? And what I guess they decided was put all the commercial stuff along the road, the thoroughfare, and the housing back off the road. That seems to be one of the models. I think what I'd love to learn is there another model, or is this going to be inevitably as as the Navajo Nation tries to develop more tourism on its end, on the north end. Are we going to be another essentially Verde Valley tourism channel?
Harriet, I don't think under current zoning that's even possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the comprehensive plan is, oh, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, the remaining commercially zoned properties along 89 are few and far between and are fairly well restricted. So the good news, I think, for most of us is that it's unlikely to see anything even remotely resembling that. But John, I think, brought up something earlier, which is the potential for a higher density type housing development in our area. And one of the questions we should probably pose is it appropriate along that corridor to perhaps have that higher density?
Yeah. Do we put everything there, I guess, is my question.
Yeah.
Well, I'd add that both the regional plan and the comprehensive plan, along with Rob's comments, really were written in a manner that would not allow that kind of development, or at least slow it down considerably. And I'd like to comment on that. There are other jurisdictions in other parts of the country that have recognized the biggest strip mall in the world, which is Prescott Valley, that we just heard about, and have created planning and zoning to prevent that in the future. State of Vermont is a good example of where it got out of control, and then they went after it to try to prevent that in the future.
I would agree with you there, Rob. And I think one of the things that we've all said is that we want to maintain the rural character. And if you have a large multiplex housing unit, that to me is not consistent with a rural character. I think there was somebody else that was trying to share also.
Yeah, it's Cameron. We got to remember that boards change and people can go ahead and they can process for zone changes in the future. And so to sit back and say, well, it can't happen, I don't think that's a good way to handle it, because the fact of the matter is, in 20 or 30 years, when there's another zoning board or another, and they're looking at the bottom dollar and building commercial properties for the influx of income at that point, and they allow for a lot of those non-commercial properties to become commercial, my point of view is that I think we need to set a culture now that establishes what you want, instead of just saying, we kind of don't want anything.
I love the idea of saying what we would like to see here. I would like Viola's nursery on any corner that's a commercial corner.
That's it. You've got to decide what you want, because I'm telling you, in 20 years, when you've got a different board and there's people on it who aren't looking at the same things, and you guys are all, and everybody's gone, things can change pretty quickly. So you have things in place that you love already. It's going to be a harder push for people to convert empty land that's already converted to something you love.
I think we ought to be positive then.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this also brings up the question of affordable housing. And I have a few friends that are realtors, and one of the things I constantly hear from them is that a lot of people are leaving the larger cities and they're coming to places like Flagstaff. And Doney Park is prime real estate now, and you all may have seen, the prices have been going up. So how do we manage to have affordable housing so that folks, teachers like me can afford a house in Doney Park, Fernwood, Timberline, and still be able to live here with a reduced income? So
Brian, those realtors would probably be telling you that the primary driver behind the cost is the cost of the property. And
they would, yes.
With the zoning density we have here, that becomes kind of a non-issue, because we can't exceed that. The density is never going to drive that cost that way.
I'd like to add one thing. You have a great deal of policy already in the current area plan that relates to how you make the decisions at both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Supervisors when these questions come up about what are you going to do with housing? Is it going to be high density? What are you going to do? Is it going to be affordable housing? And where will it go? So a lot of the guidance is already there. There are a few things that do need to be updated, but much of it in terms of policy is already there.
And I would like to chime in on that because there are those policies and we'll be looking at all of them in relation to this very exercise, because this is a high level vision. And as Cameron mentioned, think about in 20 years what the vision for the area would be. And if the community would like to see more viola type nursery developments, then that's something that this vision can help direct. If additional housing choices and affordable housing choices are what is going to be needed in the future to accommodate people, then this is what that vision can help direct. And then from that, we'll look more closely at those policies and make those adjustments to make sure that the vision can then be achieved. And so things are changing. We have already seen that there are additional pressures on housing. And we're going to be, if we can get to it tonight, we're going to be looking really specifically at some of the areas that at our zoning and the available land left for build out. So I think that this is the time to think from a 30,000 foot view down onto Doney Park in 20 years. And in an ideal world, what would you like to see?
In an ideal world, we'd have a crystal ball so we could tell it was going to happen. Unfortunately, we don't, but we can pretty much, I think, predict that the costs in the city of Flagstaff are going to continue to drive more and more people out of the town.
Yeah.
My thought is that we're all very, very fortunate to live in an area that we all appreciate so much, but there's going to be pressures, as Melissa was talking about, to try to, I think, increase the density and affordability out in this area. And we can either say we don't want any of it, or we could probably say maybe there are some places where a higher density or manufactured home or something like that that would serve that affordability sector that will exist and is going to continue to get more and more difficult in the future. It might be better to be proactive and identify that now than allow it later on to happen regardless.
That's what we're pushing for.
I'd love to see some sketches from architects or urban designers or whatever that sort of could look at what we are now, rural and outdoorsy and horses and livestock, whatever our own images are, but could provide us with a mixture of, well, these are the kinds of affordable housing that are available. Maybe we could have a different kind of affordable housing. We have patio houses all over Houston when I left. And those were actually quite attractive and fit in with neighborhoods. They were designed to fit in rather than just stick out. But maybe we could invite some urban planners to come tell us what we could do rather than just throw it out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. That's a great idea. And we can get some images to show that would illustrate that.
Along with that, I think we need to be looking at where those properties might be. And again, we're approaching build out. And I think, Melissa, you said that you anticipate that we'll hit that. And I forget what the timing is, but within 20 years, I believe.
Yeah, siting for anything other than what we have right now is going to be the big issue with it in the future, because appropriate siting for anything, especially when it entails rezoning, really generates a lot of discussion and more.
And I would like to remind everybody when we heard the discussion about the regional plan and we touched on the activity centers. that the regional plan has identified. Those are locations that were, and there are 7 of them within the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area that are primarily, well, all but one are primarily for neighborhood commercial. They're quite large, and those are potentially areas that could have mixed use housing. There are options to maybe including new activity centers, which is a way of clustering development where it seems appropriate along major corridors, along major transportation routes, where there might be opportunities for public transit. So those are some other thoughts to put into this conversation. Because the question of where is a big one, and I wouldn't want to give the idea that we can actually look at specific parcels for potentially rezoning, but we could look at general areas that might be appropriate for that, and those can then be identified in the plan.
And I have one final thought. I promise to shut up in a minute. The other thing I would love for us to consider is what would be things that the community out here would like. We all drive 9 miles in to go to the first grocery store that we come to. That maybe we start thinking about a market of some kind, expand something or put something in, and then cut down on the transportation that we have as an issue out here that would reduce our footprint even on driving. So I was thinking, what do we want? A veterinarian, a grocery store, a pharmacy. I'm just saying, let's think positively about, gee, I wish I didn't have to go into town today, and see what that produces.
So what I'm hearing is that there is possibly an interest in bringing more commercial services to Doney Park and actually allowing for those opportunities to be cited, and it might take changes. That would likely take some changes in some zoning, but I'm also hearing to not Prescott Valley, Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. So there is a balance there, but I do think that this is definitely the time where we can strike a balance and make sure that the policies will reflect this. Does that sound accurate?
Absolutely, you got it.
Okay.
I agree.
I have a comment. I would like to say that I think that people live out here because live out in the country. If we wanted to have a grocery store down the street, we would move into town. And I think a lot of people want to come here because it's the way it is, not something like, the comment about Prescott Valley. There's people that are saying that's getting way too bad to even live there. And I don't want to, I like the idea of being proactive about saying what kinds of businesses, whether they be low water usage, low density. I like the idea of keeping the lot sizes large and not having a lot of people in your neighborhood that are, making it like a city.
Hey, Bernice, I would like to add to that a little bit. Rather than selecting specific types of businesses, I think it maybe serve us better if we chose to identify impacts of different types of businesses that would or would not be compatible with our neighborhood. A lot of folks probably didn't think a shooting range was a really good idea. I hope most of those now aren't as concerned as they were. But rather than specifying specific types of businesses or whatever, I think it would be better if we focused on the impacts. Is this going to create a noise problem? Is this going to create a traffic problem? Is this going to otherwise adversely impact our environment rather than a particular type or kind of business?
Rob is absolutely right about that, and that is one of the driving factors behind some of the changes in the zoning code and their performance standards. And those performance standards become extremely important in doing exactly what Rob is talking about. looking at the impacts. And the other thing is we tend to look at those as a policy matter when, say, a conditional use permit is asked for. And I think Rob knows a little bit about conditional use permits. So he's absolutely right. Those impacts are one of the very important things that we look at in terms of what's in the zoning code and what use permits are, what their requirements are. So policies help planning and zoning and the Board of Supervisors make those decisions. So that's why this document is very important in that respect, rather than looking at the type of business.
Is it okay if I jump in for a second, even though I'm not on committee? This is Dan.
Sure, go for it, Dan.
Sorry for interrupting. I do represent a kind of a medium large group of citizens, and our main goal is to preserve the neighborhoods that are already here. So I've heard over and over and over from many people in our group that they really bought out here because of the rural way of life and are kind of not really excited about a commercial corridor of any kind more than what's already here. We're more specific to the events at the Horseman's Lodge, but the general consensus is we don't want 89 to be a big commercial corridor. So I just thought I'd jump in, let you know what this group, how they feel. No one in our group has expressed to me that they want to see commercial development on 89.
I'm sorry because I was late, but Dan, I'm sorry, what group are you representing?
Citizens for Neighborhood Preservation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We're 70 to 80 members.
I think that's been the general sentiment, Dan, that we've had with this planning group. And, one of the things that we've got to consider in looking at what types of centers we do have is at the same time, we got to look at transportation and how do people get to the different commercial centers. Are they all driving to, say, the store there on Silver Saddle? Or are people all driving into Safeway or the East Side businesses? And the point I'm making is that transportation becomes, how should I say this, synchronous with what types of community development you have and where you have it.
Thanks, Brian. And that's actually a great segue to the next slide, unless somebody has some additional thoughts. I think we can put together a draft vision statement for this topic, and we'll look at that more next month, unless anyone has any last ideas here.
Can I jump in for 1 second? This is Dan again. Does anybody done a study on how many residential lots are still available in the Timberline Fernwood area, as far as how much more business we're going to actually have in 89 than we already have? I've lived at our house there for about 17 years. I didn't know if that was something. I mean, are we pretty much getting close to maxed out for our traffic on 89?
We'll answer that question in about 10 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. Good question.
Melissa?
Hi.
Liz. Hi. Hey, just something also. I mean, have you all talked about doing a survey of the residents and just asking them some of the questions that are being asked here? Because, the last two iterations of the area plans, there was a survey, and I know there's going to be open houses and whatnot, but even before you got to the actual writing, there was a survey. And so I know there's a lot of discussion about development, what's appropriate, what's not, what do people want. I just think we need to ask the residents, because I have to say I haven't heard an overwhelming number of folks say, this is what we want. But people do understand that there are some areas that could be commercially developed, and there probably is some services that people would like to see. But again, I think it would just be great. Let's just ask the residents.
There are going to be surveys and multiple open houses, Liz.
Perfect. Okay. I knew about the open houses, but I wasn't sure about the surveys, so that's great.
Yes, and we'll actually be talking about that at the end of tonight's evening, because we need to start writing that survey now, so we can get it launched hopefully next month.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask everybody to make sure their microphone is on mute? I am hearing some background noise. Thanks. Brian, are you ready to move on to the next slide? Okay, I think that was a yes.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next
Okay.
slide.
So the next, the final category for the vision statement is about the transportation system. And we've heard a lot about transportation and trails and transit and our county roads and also accessibility. So here, if we could just brainstorm for about 7 minutes as far as what that vision, how that would come together for this plan. And I've got some prompts up here for you.
Is this what we would like to see?
Yes, remember, this is the vision for the future, thinking ahead.
Well, I think roads, we could say that we want to see them able to support multimodal types of transportation. So they need to be compatible with both, traditional vehicle traffic, with foot traffic, with bicycle traffic, with equestrian traffic. Those kinds of things all are important to us out in this area.
Is there any hope at all that we could reduce truck traffic on 89? I know that sounds ridiculous, but I thought I'd throw it out there. No? Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
It's a state route. We don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a major corridor that I don't think we're going to have much control over. I would say roads that are made. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is there any way to, I've had several inquiries on the downhill part going into Silver Saddle, that the Jake brakes be limited on that area. Is that any possibility we can start something there?
That would have to be something done through the state DOT, I believe, not as part of this process.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'd like to chime in on that. I'm working for the state for 24 years up here.
Steve, your connection, we're losing your connection, Steve.
55 miles an hour.
Steve, if you can hear me, your connection is really slow.
I hear every Jake brake is from on for the Silver Saddle. Sorry about that. I'll try that. I might try one more time real quick. Working for the, Melissa, go ahead without me. This connection, it pops in and out.
You can email Steve, email that to me if you like.
Or he could post it in chat.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. Melissa, for your list, I would say roads that are consistently maintained, public transportation that is accessible and meets rider demand. I like Rob's inclusion of trails and bikeways that are multimodal along access roads, and public safety that is able to respond within for emergencies. And I'm noting here that Sheriff Driscoll said that they were wanting to have a substation out here. I'm not sure what the accessibility looks like.
Yeah. How about dust abatement? Does that fit anywhere?
That would be part of road maintenance in my perception, but that's, you could add that.
Well, I just want to add any kind of dust.
Depends on if the road is a private road or a county maintained road.
Absolutely.
If it's a private road, county will not put dust abatement on it
Yep.
or
Okay,
take care of it.
But we could encourage or request or get subdivisions to provide, or we could start asking people to look around and try to be more sociable maybe.
Probably, probably one of the things that could go in the area plan as a matter of policy would be simply to encourage the formation of road maintenance or road improvement districts by residents. It's going to be hard to do. Nobody wants to vote to increase their taxes. They'll put up with a little bit of dust first, or a lot of dust first. So just keep that in mind.
John, I think we've mentioned that before, and we also said that that would be another good thing to include references to the process of how to do that in our document. So that
you can always put it in as a part of encouragement, but when it comes to subdivisions, typically with a subdivision, the requirements are minimum standards that the county uses, and subdivisions now tend to want to put in a paved road and expect the county to pick up maintenance of it if they make it to the right spec. So subdivisions aren't much of a problem, but the private roads, a lot of dust, a lot of people maintain their own section of them. So Rob's absolutely right. A reference to that, where to go if you want to do it.
And if you remember sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was going to second Brian's comment about the substation. I think encourage some type of encouraging words in our document might in the future be really helpful for a sheriff's department who is trying to get some additional funding to do something like that. So if there is a way to address how that would add an important benefit to this community in our document, that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Yes, good evening, everyone. This is Jay. Rob and Commissioner Ruggles are right. I just wanted to circle back with the dust abatement with the roads. So anything that were to happen as an outcome of this area plan would be with new development, not existing development. So dust abatement for roads that are already dirt, possibly problematic, this area plan would not affect that. So circling back to Commissioner Ruggles with regards to the subdivisions, if a new subdivision came out, that's definitely something that we could implement.
Thanks, Jay, for that clarification. And then too, as we heard from Nick Hall when he talked to us, that the road maintenance or an improvement district is a way to address that outside of county maintenance. So that's quite an effort for people to organize, but that is a mechanism that could be encouraged by the area plan.
You bet. Yeah, that's a great tool. Thanks, Melissa.
Melissa, I'm not clear on your last bullet there. Accessibility that looks like. Help me understand that better.
Well, so accessibility, and the reason why I put this up there, it's so that everyone of every ability can get onto trails, can get to the parks. And so that it's not just limited to people who are on a horse or on a bike, but everyone has access to this transportation system.
Isn't that covered by ADA and other federal and state local laws?
Well, it is, and to a large degree, but an area plan, I mean, can certainly encourage that to be even more than what would necessarily be required for new buildings, for instance, because accessibility, universal accessibility is something that is not always thought of in development. So
Again, it's worthwhile to have in there, just like Rob says, because if we look at a subdivision, no matter how small, an accessibility requirement for everyone, I think is going to become increasingly more important, and we should address it as part of policy.
I know I've been to several parks and different places where there are accessible viewpoints for people that are in wheelchairs, where they can get partway onto the trail system, maybe not go the whole way. But that's what I was thinking when I put that in there, because there are many. It seems like there'll be many opportunities for trails planning in this area plan, and that was just something I wanted to see if that resonated with the group to talk about. Okay, is this enough on transportation?
Let me toss another idea out here, and that is, we talk about public transportation, but we also have to have areas where individuals could park their cars so that they could get on a bus or get onto a van. So I think we need to also look at, how shall I say this, infrastructure that, parking areas that would support people using public transportation.
Thank you.
We could add trails too, because we don't have enough parking for cars or horse trailers or anything to access some of the trails that people like to go on.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have a question about the substation for the sheriffs. We've been hearing increasingly more and more sirens going up Townsend Winona Road and on 89. And I'm concerned that, you know, depending on where the substation is and if they're getting called out of Doney Park to other areas of the county, is that going to, you know, possibly increase the noise? We've got a real problem with dogs barking in the middle of the night when those sirens go down, and you know, we want to keep this place quiet.
So Bernice, noise can be a policy that can be identified by the plan. I don't think that the substation or location for it is even close to being identified. But if noise and preserving natural quiet is an important value, then we need to make sure that that is reflected in the plan.
So just to give you a heads up, 89 is one of the deadliest roads in Arizona. That's why you have sirens going up. So it's not going to decrease right now. It's the summer months. And with that comes traffic accidents. I was a police officer for 13 years, worked with DPS guys. My wife was a DPS dispatcher, and it's just a bad road. And so you're always going to have that siren problem. It's going to increase as the years go by. I'm just sorry to say.
And Bernice, I think a substation, it wouldn't be like a Guardian ambulance barn where they're always parked there and that's where they always dispatch from. It would be more like a local location where, you know, they wouldn't have to travel all the way into town and all the way back every time. They could be stationed out here. They'd spend some time there, but not, you know, dispatched exclusively from there.
Yeah, the way substations work is it's a place where officers can go and type reports and get a snack and do all those types of things. And like Rob's saying, it's just so you don't have to go all the way back into town. You can actually have kind of a jump off point. And so it does nothing but serve kind of those specific areas. And they usually try to put them in areas that are more remote or have higher crime rates or things like that, just so that there's a good jumping off point. So yeah, it's not like a regular station.
Thanks for that clarification, Cameron.
And just the visibility, having them there can help maintain a less crime, I think, just having them there.
Mm-hmm. There's always the deterrence.
Any other thoughts on this topic?
Let's move on.
Okay, so I had thought we might take a break now. We've already had a break, so here's your pizza for the night. Okay, and then we'll just go on. Now we're going to talk about the build-out numbers. And we're going to switch gears here because all the rest of the slides are pretty much based on our acreage, what's left to build out, what's already developed, and then we'll also look at some demographics. So we'll be into numbers at this point. We saw this slide last time, and I just wanted to remind us again of the size of our planning area. It's almost 43,000 acres. Of that, 68% or nearly 30,000 acres is federal. That's a combination of Forest Service and also Walnut Canyon National Monument. The state has one big section, 648 acres, and then the privately owned land is right around 13,000. That includes the land that's owned by the Coconino County, by City of Flagstaff, by the railroad, and as well as private landowners. So just to kind of paint the picture. This slide drills down into that a little bit further. And what it shows here is that the railroad owns almost 500 acres, City of Flagstaff 22 acres, the county 108, the National Forest, privately owned land that is not City of Flagstaff, BNSF, et cetera, is right around 12,500. And then Walnut Canyon National Monument is 170 acres. So I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. If anyone would like me to stop, just chime in, please. And this, yes.
Melissa, is the city-owned land, is that the wastewater site?
It might be. It could also be part of the landfill. I don't know exactly, Brian. We'd have to look at that.
Oh, the landfill. Absolutely. Yes. Okay.
Just because part of the road is, I'm not sure. We could check on that.
No worries.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about the zoned acres, and this is a little bit of a nuance. So remember, the National Forest owns almost 30,000 acres. Of the land that they own, 13,000 of that actually has residential zoning on it. So this is a bit of a nuance just to understand. The privately owned land is zoned, and again, that number is the same. So all privately owned land is zoned. The state trust land, interestingly, is also zoned. It's zoned agricultural residential, 5-acre minimum. The railroad land is owned. They've got mixed zones on the properties that they have. And then the county, also the land that the county owns is zoned as well. So that just kind of gives a little bit more detail in terms of the zoned acres within the planning area.
Melissa, real quickly, in order for the Forest Service land to actually be residential, it has to transfer over. And
it wouldn't. Exactly. Just like Joshua was explaining, it would have to go through that land exchange process. It is interesting that at some point it was zoned. So hypothetically then, if a piece were to be exchanged, then it would already have the zoning on it. So it's a way of letting people know what might come in the future.
Okay.
Is there a way to unzone land?
That is something that is basically we would say that there's not a very easy way to do that, Rob. That would be stripping entitlements off of something, and that's not a world that we want to get into.
I'd like to add a little bit to that for Rob. Prop 207 limits us tremendously, but it's not an impossible proposition. We've had a number of cases come to the Planning and Zoning Commission where someone has actually requested down zoning. And there are some circumstances under which it may be a profitable down zoning for them, but not very many.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on then. I just wanted to show this in terms of the ratio of residential zoning to the other types of zoning. And as you can see, 97% of the zoned property in the planning area is zoned for residential. 3% is zoned for either commercial, industrial, or mineral resource. And we'll look at that more closely in a second. What I wanted to do now is talk a bit about what is left to be developed. And so this is a breakdown, and I know it's late, and I know this chart is probably not fun to look at. But what is important to note is right here, under the vacant acres, total residential zone vacant acres, right around 1,800. The majority of the vacant acres are in the AR 2.5, so the agricultural residential zone. We've got about 1,300 vacant acres remaining to be built out. I do want to make a comment on the agricultural, the AR5, the 286 vacant acres. Just last night, the Board of Supervisors approved a new subdivision, so that would take out about 111 acres from that total and would drop it down. I didn't remove it yet. That hasn't been recorded. I'm assuming it will be recorded, and that would actually change this mixture. So this is, again, in terms of residential acres, and this does not include the county-owned or the city-owned or the railroad-owned property. This is strictly what is owned by individuals or other entities. So we have about 1,800 acres left of residential zoning to build out. And what does that mean in terms of new dwellings? Well, what we do then, we look at the number of acres, and then we multiply it out by the actual minimum numbers of acres based on the zoning district, and this is what we ended up with. What I've done here is I have applied a reduction factor because in many cases when you've got a large piece of property and it's being subdivided, there are roads taken out, there's room for open space drainages, so it's about a 60% of the land is usually left over for development, so that's why it's not a straight you know, math exercise by multiplying it out. So the bottom line is that possible new single family dwellings across those 1,800 acres could be about 380. And then if you add in accessory dwelling units, that could double it to 760. And this then shows you that breakdown by the zoning district. And just to clarify, the AR is agricultural residential, G is general with a 10-acre minimum, and the RS is residential single family.
Melissa, real quick, this is Evelyn. What would the activity center areas be included in this chart?
Right, good question, and we're going to look at those in a second. Interestingly, most of the activity centers include commercial zoning. Okay, now the county we did recently update our zoning ordinance. Some of the commercial zones allow for mixed use development, meaning there could be mixed commercial and residential, but those activity centers, and we're going to look at the map in a minute, most of them don't have residential zoning within them. Does that answer your question?
Melissa, I have
thank you.
Something I'd like to ask you. Would it be possible to map the largest remaining parcels of privately owned but vacant land?
We're going to look at that in a minute. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, we'll get into that. So,
good.
One other question, Melissa. The ADUs that you have listed here, that's only associated with the currently undeveloped. There's potential for far more ADUs.
Right. So on existing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is only in terms of the build out.
All right. Thank you.
You're right. And I haven't looked at, and I don't really know of a good way to determine the number of existing ADUs, but that's another issue, another problem. So yeah.
But I think an important part or point for everyone to recognize here is while 380 is one number and 760 is another, neither of those reflect what it could really potentially become if all the existing locations added ADUs.
We could actually figure that out. So based on the number of parcels that we know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving on then in terms of commercial. And this was interesting to me when I saw the numbers come out because what's highlighted in green, so these zoning districts, just let me clarify, the CG 10,000 is our commercial general zone. There's a total of 88 acres in the planning area, 71 are developed, 18 are vacant. The CH is commercial heavy. And interestingly, we've got 31 acres, they're all developed. There's no additional CH 10,000 zoning available for development. Now, that is not to say that everything is fully utilized. This doesn't look at, you know, whether or not something is being used to its highest potential. So there might be a 5-acre parcel and it is considered development by the assessor. And it doesn't mean that it actually couldn't hold more development, but this is just looking at vacant land. IH, that is heavy industrial. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of zoned heavy industrial, 242 acres. About a little more than half of that is still vacant. And MR, and I left this in here, mineral resource, is actually an interesting zoning district because when there are parcels that are greater than 5 commercial acres, they're actually exempt from our zoning rules. And most of these parcels are. But I wanted to include this in here because it is part of the mix of land uses and zoning within Doney Park. So Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. So there's a total of 154. Of those, 118 are vacant, but those are probably classified as vacant because they're just being mined and there's not a building on it. So that's a snapshot of commercial. And then this next slide is a bit redundant, but it just shows in terms of build out by acres, and it did drop a bit. So for the commercial general, when you consider building out commercial, that again, there is somewhat of a reduction factor when you look at parking and the need for a septic system, it does drop the amount. So I'm estimating about 15 acres left of commercial general. There's no commercial heavy zoning left in today's mix, quite a bit of heavy industrial and then mineral resources. So that's what's available left as far as these zoning districts. And again, it doesn't take into account any potential rezoning.
Melissa, can you give me an example of mineral resources zoning?
I'm sorry?
Can you give me an example of a parcel that's a mineral resource parcel?
Yes, we're going to look at that right now.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
We're going to actually zoom in.
Let me ask real quick, what do the numbers mean? The CG 10,000?
Oh, okay. Yeah, then that just means that's the minimum required parcel size. So 10,000 square feet.
10,000 square feet.
Yes, for a commercial parcel. So that's why I wanted to emphasize that the build out, where there might be a 5-acre parcel that is currently considered developed, but it may not be fully utilized. In other words, it could be further divided into more CG 10,000 parcels. Same with heavy industrial, it's a minimum of 6,000 square feet parcel sizes. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to have to switch screens here because I wanted to look at the story map. We'll see if this will do this without my, okay. All right, let me do this. Okay, can you see the story map? Did that display?
Yes. I have the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood area plan update, explore your community.
Yes, okay. So I don't know if you all have had a chance to actually look at this, but this is the tool that our GIS department has put together for us to help us with our process. And it appears to be working a little bit slowly, but this is where we can actually look at some of those parcels. And I'm just going to go ahead and go over here to the activity center. So remember I mentioned that there are 7 activity centers within Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. And they're all numbered, and the regional plan has them numbered, so I just follow that numbering scheme. This circle indicates that there's an activity center. It actually should be over here. Okay, can you all see this redder area? I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so here's I-40, and this is the Townsend Winona Road interconnection to the interstate. And over here on the left are just some images of this gas station. So this is part of the area plan. This is on the very eastern edge of the area plan. And what I wanted to show is over here on the legend. Can you see the legend?
Yes.
So they've highlighted the vacant land for us. So residential vacant parcels are in blue, commercial are in red, and the industrial are in the teal color. They've also highlighted for us the parcels that are owned by the railroad, by the city, and by the county, just to make it really clear. So here you can see these red heavy outlined are vacant parcels. These over here are vacant industrial parcels. So the zoning is on here as well. Here's CG 10,000. Up here in this orange color is owned by the railroad, but the MR stands for mineral resources. So Brian, this is where you can see these are mineral resource zoned parcels. And this is that cinder mine out on the east side. Does that look familiar?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And so, and John Ruggles, this will show us some of the large, there are a lot of, remember there were about there's about 1,800 acres of vacant residential parcels. And here you can see some of the large vacant parcels outlined in blue.
Where are those located?
That's Loop Road to the left of those, I think.
That is Loop Road. Here's Townsend Winona. Here's Loop Road. And so we could go through each of the activity centers. And this was I thought that might be the most useful way to kind of look at some of these locations because we're not together in a room. And this is such a large planning area. This tool allows us to zoom in. Here's another activity center. Here's Lumberjack, Slayton Ranch, right on Townsend Winona. You can see here there are some vacant commercial properties. If we drop this bar down, we can go to the next rural activity center. And this is the only one that doesn't have any commercial zoning. This is by the school and Cokefield Road. And then you can actually see there are some vacant parcels, vacant residential parcels around here. And then this is showing up as a county-owned parcel. This is the park. The other activity centers, rural activity center number 4. Hi, Rob. This is Rob's place. But you can see there are a couple of vacant CG 10,000 parcels there. Again, you can see the blue residential parcels highlighted. And it's all scattered around. So this is why we have a map with these parcels highlighted on it. It is difficult to see on a computer monitor. So that's why I thought we would do it this way. I'm going to go to Rural Activity Center 5, which is just down the road at Silver Saddle. There's only one parcel of commercial zoning left here, several larger residential vacant parcels. If we go to Activity Center number 6, which is further down 89. And again, if you all want to look at this later, you can scroll down. We've got images loaded up to help describe this activity center area. There is a written description of what it is up here. And then you can see some of these vacant parcels outlined in red. And here is one of the large residential parcels over here outlined in blue just south of Burris Lane. And then finally, Rural Activity Center 7 is interesting. This is right at the border of the county and the city of Flagstaff. And this is all that heavy commercial zoning, and there are no vacant parcels left here in this activity center. So really, when you start looking at it this way, then where are the opportunities for additional commercial zone, for commercial activities or commercial build out? We can also look at the different vacant parcels by looking at the different road systems. So if you click on, for instance, the Campbell Avenue, you can see there are just a handful of vacant parcels around Campbell Avenue. Same with Cosnino. Sometimes if you're using this tool, you have to zoom in to see more detail. But again, you can start seeing where some of the vacant parcels are. The recent subdivision that was approved is this parcel right here. Can everybody see that AR5 outlined in blue? Can everybody see that?
Yes,
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this was the one that was just approved. So this is 111 acres then that will come out of that. And so again, on the left, you can scroll down, look at different images. We just started building this, and we can certainly add to this. This is a tool for you all to use, and we can make this whatever it is that you want it to be. Highway 89, again, that was a big corridor, so you have to zoom in closer to see what it is that we're looking at. And again, here we were intending to look at the well, it's zoomed out. That's why that's not on this layer, because it's too far out. You have to zoom in to see the vacant parcels. Johnson Ranch Road, this is interesting, and it's another comment I wanted to bring up, because the vacant parcels, we did not include any of these that are in subdivisions that are zoned for PRD. PRD is Planned Residential Development, and they are vacant today, but it's really not appropriate to include that in a build out scenario because they're already subdivided. So even though they're showing up as vacant, it's not in our total number, if that makes sense. Silver Saddle. Again, you can see the handful of vacant parcels around Silver Saddle. Timberline Fernwood, I didn't zoom in very closely on this one. We can zoom in further to see. Our vacant parcel status, and then you can drag it. You can't break this, so you can just play with it, zoom in and out, and drag it around. That's kind of a better view than of some of the vacant properties in the Timberline and Fernwood area. And then finally on Townsend Winona, again, that's a long corridor, so you really have to zoom in. But I wanted to give everybody a sense of where some of the larger vacant parcels are, in particular in relation to the commercial zoning. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments on what we just looked at?
Yes, I have one. Can you email that URL?
Absolutely. This is also posted, if you have been by any chance looking on our planning and zoning webpage. This is a link right on that webpage, but I will email it all to you as well because this is a tool for your community. We can add tabs to this. The culture and history tab, I will show you this just very quickly. It has nothing to do with vacant parcels, but the idea here was to talk about some of what we know are the cultural sites. You can click on this. It will take you right to Eldon Pueblo, to that site. It takes a moment sometimes to load, especially late at night when everything's tired. And then if you scroll down, we've got the historic bridge on Townsend Winona, and it will zoom you over there just in terms of a location. So yeah, this tool is a work in progress. We can continue to work on it, but I thought that it would be a useful map to look at tonight. So again, look at the legend, look at the vacant land, residential, commercial, industrial. The ownership will help to further identify who owns what. And then down here is our county zoning districts. So I know that's a lot of information, and I do want to stop sharing at this point on this one and go back to the presentation if everyone's okay with that.
Just one thing, real quick, Melissa.
Yes.
Is there a link associated with this that will take you to the parcel viewer, the assessor's parcel map with all of the data that goes with that? And number two, as a part of our references in the area plan, there should be a reference to, or at least the link is given for that, because it is extremely useful information if you want to know anything about property ownership, how many acres it is, what's the zoning.
In terms of the parcel viewer?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can, I can put a link to parcel viewer, I believe I can, into the story map.
Good, that would be very useful.
Okay.
I know how much I use it.
Right. And that's, yeah, I can add that.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave, I'll caution you, it's a time suck. And just to toss this out there, Muzzle, you'll probably hate this idea, but this is I think, an awesome beginning of something that could actually be our area plan. Why not have it be an online, real live document like this, that rather than a booklet or a PDF, make it something like this that's interactive and integrate all of our plans, policies, procedures, thoughts into something that is real time like this and can could be updated with photographs and things like that.
We can certainly work on that. It might be a hybrid between a document with all the policies listed and something like this. So it's definitely a tool. This is a service the county subscribes to, and I think that our GIS department is thrilled that we're actually using it. So yeah, well, the more ideas, the better. and we can explore that.
And if it were interactive, like John said with the parcel map, there's just so much power then available to you and knowledge there. It would be really helpful.
So what I will do, I will add the parcel viewer link in a separate tab up here.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So let's just move on.
So if you see a parcel on the story map, it should go right to the parcel viewer info.
Yeah, let me find out about that. That's a GIS question. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll find out. Okay. So going to the next slide, if I can advance my slides. There we go. So I have a bunch of slides on demographics. I'm going to check the time, and we have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to move through these very quickly. Here's an estimate on current population in our planning area, right around a little over 10,000. And I'm going to send, whoops, pardon me. I will send everybody the links, rather this PowerPoint, because there's a lot to absorb here. The key that I want to bring up is that all of these numbers are derived from the American Community Survey, and this is put out by the Census Bureau. These were during the years 2014, 2018. I want to emphasize that their survey area is really just the center of Doney Park. With the next census that's coming up, the one that's running right now, it will pretty much cover the entire planning boundary. But this was just for that donut in the middle. The median age back during these years was 39 years old, the median age. You can see there's a different spread. I'm not going to get into all these details now, but this is something that we'll be looking at throughout the next phase of our process. Types of household. Most of the households in our planning area are married couple families. And I just put here Doney Park CDP because that's called a census designated place. Interestingly, 7.5% of people in that survey area speak a language other than English, and in this case, it's Spanish. There have been some ethnicity changes between 2010 and 2018, where you can see on this column on the left, the number of people who identify as white has increased, while the number of people who identify as American Indian has dropped. So that is a trend that will be interesting to see how that's turning out with the next census. We have some housing characteristics. Not surprisingly, the majority of the houses are single-family homes, with mobile homes following that. So this was interesting. There are, owners with and without mortgages, but there's a fairly high percentage of renters in the planning area, or rather in the CDP. In terms of education, and we can come back to this next time if we're going too fast, but down here, pretty much this sums it up. About almost 90% of people 25 years and over have at least graduated from high school. 38.7 have a bachelor's degree or higher.
Hey, Melissa, these are all great numbers, but without anything to reference them to, I'm not sure how meaningful they are. So I'm wondering if we are going to come back to this in the future, could we add bars that show, maybe Flagstaff and Coconino County as comparisons to this, so we understand what this is really telling us?
We could, and this was just a snapshot of, understanding what it is in our planning area, and we can look at comparisons later for sure for some of these select tabs. You're welcome. And then just in terms of looking at poverty rates, and actually during this time frame, 8.7% of people lived in poverty in this planning area. So that was something I actually didn't know about until I looked at this. And then the median household income was right around 79,000. And the majority of people are occupied in, or rather occupations fall in management, business, science, or arts. And there are a lot of other categories under these major headings if that's a question that people want to dive into. Commuter status, probably not surprising. Most people drive to work. Mean travel time about 22 minutes. Although a fair number are carpooling, so about 13% of people are carpooling. And then finally, I know this was something that we've talked about, at least during this time frame, it appeared that about 88% of households had a broadband internet subscription. Whether or not it works well is another question, but so that should help inform us in terms of moving ahead with our online survey. But I also want to talk about asset mapping. We're not going to get into this tonight, but this is something that I wanted to cover because back when we heard Amanda Atchison talk about sustainability, she brought up the idea of a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weakness, opportunity. And I think though, for our purpose, that asset mapping is actually probably would maybe resonate more with this group, because what that does, it helps us to identify what the strengths are in the community and then what is needed to protect those and what are the resources that sustain them. So community assets are things like natural assets, physical assets, human assets, social capital, and economic assets. And this is something that I would propose that we embark on, and we can actually, what I would do is I could email and or mail packets to everybody, and this would be a homework assignment actually, to look at a map, identify community assets and resources, make a list on a sheet that we would provide, and then we can use these to help further the policies. Was there a question? Okay. So here's just an example of what we can do. So when we look at, and we would categorize these in terms of following the same categories as we're working on our vision statement, and would drill down into that further. So for natural resources, open space, and environment, what are the assets that make Doney Park what it is today and are important to the future? So some leaders would be our trails, bike connections into Flagstaff, Peaksview Park, those are assets. What are the resources that support the assets? Well, we've heard about the FTI, the urban trail system. We have a multimodal plan we heard about. And then what are some of the barriers or the gaps? Well, we have lack of easements we have, to provide access to all the trails, lack of trail maintenance. This actually goes on quite a ways. I've already started filling some things out, but I wanted to just show you real briefly what that might look like. And so how would we do that? Well, there would be 4 asset categories. I could send you all maps, the asset worksheets, and then just ask you all to help fill that out. And my question to you is if this seems like it's an exercise worthy of pursuing, and then I can, as I said, put something in the US mail and or email to you. Because this is something then we could build an asset map and include it in the plan. Any thoughts on that?
Melissa, could you help me understand better? I get this map in the mail, a big 36 by 24 map. And what would you want me to do with that then?
I would want you, so I would also send you tables like this, 4 different categories. And then you would look on the map and you would draw or make points and hopefully make it clear that these are the assets that I see related to natural resources, open space, and environment. These are the assets I see in terms of our land use, growth, and development. These are assets I see for our transportation system. And then the resources that support those, and then the barriers that are preventing us from meeting those. And then what I would do is
you would combine all those inputs.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And then we would have a discussion on it.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at what the Flagstaff Trails Initiative did, they actually had people go online and, no, I'm sorry, I don't think it was online. I believe it was in a meeting. And they had maps. If we were together, we would have maps in front of us. We would break out into small groups. We would all have pens and markers, and you would be drawing on the maps. But I thought that then we could just do this by individually, and then I'll combine everything.
So if I'm correct here, we're asking everyone who is on the committee to go through this process and get it back to you prior to September 1st?
13th, but before the next, excuse me, the next meeting is September 10th.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna need some time to pull it together. That's a short time frame.
Well, it's ready to pull together. It's ready to mail out to you next week. I can mail it out to you next week. And then that will give you about 3 weeks to work on it. 2.5 weeks.
And it'll give you 24 hours to consolidate everything.
I know. I know.
Wouldn't it be more uniform if we were to have the packets and then work together on the questions, so that then you wouldn't have to pull it together because we would have it all consolidated? And it would, I'm kind of confused on some of it. So I just think, you know, having more heads working on it, we could come out with a clearer, some clearer statements.
Well, Bernice, that's certainly one way to do this exercise. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to actually get something into your, and we could do a hybrid. I could still mail everything to you, and then you can look at it individually and then be prepared when we come together to just jump into it.
Melissa, are we prevented from being able to meet in person?
I don't have any, yeah, at this point, the county is still not open to the public, so I don't have the ability to offer that.
But could we have working groups off-site?
I'd have to check on that. I mean, and as your own, under your own organization, or just organizing it yourselves?
For districts, I'm talking, Rob, that would be so good. And John, our area out here, the furthest north part, would look at things very differently maybe from the people who are down by Cosnino. I would think that would be very fruitful.
So you're thinking of getting together on your own?
On the porch, yeah, on the porch.
Sure, I mean, yeah, I mean, I just can't organize it. It can't be a county organized meeting that way.
Right.
Yeah, whatever works for you.
But I would think, you know, a porch outside where we're safe with a mask, to go over it and see what we all see together. I'd help with that.
I like the Zoom format because you have access to your own restroom, you know.
Okay.
I feel uncomfortable going in people's houses. I know 8 people with COVID.
Okay.
Yeah,
it sounds like that's a lot.
I don't even go in my friends' houses. I limit my social circle to 2 people and I don't go in their houses.
I want to circle back to something that Rob or someone mentioned, and that is, I totally agree that folks in Timberline and Fernwood are going to look at things differently than those of us over here on, you know, Slayton Ranch or Cosnino or so forth.
And that's the point of this, actually.
To get different perspectives.
That's right.
But I'm wondering if we might be able to form small cohorts. Each of us go through it individually, and then maybe after next meeting, then we get a mixture of people. So, you know, I'm working with somebody that's in Cosnino as well as Timberline, as well as, you know, almost into Flag City. And so then we get a mixture of people that are working online together. Is that even practical?
That's a good question, Brian. Maybe we could have a conversation offline or outside of this meeting about this. But I think what I'll go ahead and do, if everyone's agreeable to it, I'll go ahead and send you packets next week so you have it. So you have the maps and you have the tables. And then why don't maybe Brian, Rob, and I can brainstorm together how to best approach this for next time. How does that sound?
Can I interject just for one moment? This is Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
I'm listening to all this, and this is going to be a big undertaking for everybody individually. But I also know all the work that Melissa's doing with her staff that's helping her. If you all want to meet together on a Zoom meeting, a Teams meeting, and you know, I know there's a Zoom program that's free. You can meet for up to 45 minutes with it, you know, 3 or 4 of you.
That's a good point.
Harriet, you can meet on somebody's porch. I'm sure the fire stations would let you meet there as long as you were doing CDC and it was less than 10 and you had your mask on. You know, if that makes it a little easier for you guys to work and look at this in smaller groups, you can, you know, talk amongst yourself and see if that works out for you.
Thanks, Teresa. Great idea.
I have a question. It's a personal, kind of a personal question. And that is, I see what this process is, but right now I don't see how much value it has for the effort that we're looking to put into it.
What it will do, Dave, is give us an idea of what is really important to the community in terms of this planning process. And it may be that there are things out there that I don't know about, and that, as was brought up, people that live on towns of Winona, closer on the east side, will know about assets out there that people up in Timberline, Fernwood don't. So it's such a large planning area that that's one reason why we have our diverse group. And, you know, we can't possibly know the entire community. And I think that's why it would be really valuable from a planning point of view to have everyone, different perspectives looking at this. And I think it would actually be pretty quick.
Hey, Melissa, how about, I liked your idea originally. If you can get this package out to Brian and I, and he and I and you can have a conversation next week after we've had a chance to see it and what you really want to do, and then make some recommendations based on that, I think it might be a better informed plan for moving forward.
Okay, we can do that. And then, yeah, I think that this will then, because if we really think about asset mapping, then what it does, it gives us an idea of, you know, where those important places are in the community, and then if there are things we need to do to address those in the plan. It's a bit of a departure from what's been done in the past. It's not just straight land use planning. It is a different way of looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It instead focuses on, you know, what is important to protect. So yeah, we can do that. We can set up a meeting next week for sure.
I guess my personal problem is that I don't know very much about the assets around here. So even around my home.
Well, we can all learn then.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And
Melissa, it's 8:06.
I know we're late. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Moving on. So this, again, the story map can help us, you know, get a visual on what is in our community. And then just to touch briefly on our schedule. So, you know, we are in our vision, goals, and policies. So we are going to be jumping into this really fast, but we're also needing to develop our survey and get the public open houses out. So that's going to happen, again, very quickly. Ideally, we'll get the survey out by the end of September. And with that, then, I would ask, and you don't have to give me an answer right now, you can email, but I would request a smaller subcommittee to help write the survey. I'll draft it based on, you know, some of our kind of standard survey language that we've got available. And then the question would be, is if the entire committee would want to review the survey before it goes out, or if it's something that they would leave to a smaller subcommittee. So I am going to ask about that right now. Is there a general preference for how that survey is reviewed?
I think it would be good for all of us to review it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Bernice. I think
Okay.
it should go out to the entire committee, but it's perhaps drafted and then edited by a smaller committee.
Okay. So if anyone has wants to volunteer and, you know, to be on this small subcommittee, please email me. And then we will get it back to the larger committee to review. We'll also do a direct postcard mailing to our community to promote the survey. And we'll also design virtual and possibly this drive-by open house idea. So I'm not going to get into the details right now, but I did want to ask, because I am aware that there's I believe it's the Doney Park Facebook page. And I'm wondering if there are any committee members who are members of that and would possibly be willing to volunteer to post. Once we have a survey available and once we have an open house date, would be willing to post to that site.
I'd be happy to do that.
Who
Or the
is that, Rob?
next doors, if there's a next door member for either Doney Park or Timberline Fernwood.
I can do that also.
There is.
Yeah. This is Dan. This is
there's
Dan. If you
also-
guys send me it, I can send it to my group too, please. Thank you.
So Rob, you were volunteering to post to Nextdoor and Facebook?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Dan said that he would send it out to his neighborhood group.
Got it.
There's
Yeah.
there's also a Doney Park Trail Riders and a Doney Park Marketplace.
Are they, what kind of groups are they?
Facebook.
I'm going to make the posts that I put on the Doney Park page shareable. So anyone that sees them can share them with any other pages that they may be aware of. And I'm going to ask them to do that as part of it.
Okay, so maybe Bernice, if you're a member of those other groups, that would you be willing to post to those sites?
Sure.
Okay, because we'll want to get the word out far and wide once we get those surveys ready. So other than that, our next meeting is September 10th.
Can I back up just 1 second? And I apologize to everybody. Seeing an example of a previous survey from other area plans, I think might be really helpful in us getting the right mindset as to what we want to include in ours.
I'll send out the Belmont survey.
Thank you.
There also is a survey in the area plan that we are superseding.
Right.
The last area plan has a survey in it.
That's right. It's in the back of the document. Okay, so again, if anyone is interested in being on a smaller subcommittee to develop the survey, please let me know. And then with that, our next meeting will be September 10th. We'll look at the draft visions. I'll put those vision statements together. The idea was to continue with this asset mapping and to see where we were with that and hopefully have some good information. And then to talk more about the survey and the open house and the outreach. And with that, I think we're almost done. If we would like to go around and have any final public comment, committee final thoughts.
Good meeting. Thank you.
Actually, I have one thought on the survey. We should look at the existing or the previous survey, and if there's a way to see what might have changed since then in our survey. So to see if there's been a generic change that that might show up if we do the right thing in the second survey. That's all my comment.
Okay.
Yeah, wherever possible, we should try to duplicate those questions to see what changes may have occurred and then supplement them with new ones that we think are important.
We can do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Great idea.
I have to agree with Rob on that one.
Okay. Any other final thoughts or comments?
Rob's chairing the next meeting.
You're going to be
Again, my apologies. Thank you, Brian.
No worries.
All right.
Okay. Well, goodbye, everybody.
It's
Hey,
8:13.
this is a good meeting. Thank you very much, folks.
Yeah, it was a good meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Melissa.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Take care. Have a good night.
Yeah.